Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. For those of you online, thank you for logging in. There's a business book I read years ago called Never Split the Difference. And that opening reading made me think of that. And I remember reading that book and it didn't make sense to me. Compromise is always good, I thought. So that reminded me of a time when, I don't know, I guess I was more focused back then, more than I thought, not just focused on business. I remember reading that and what's wrong with compromise? Anyways, that's a different subject. We're going to talk about love tonight. The source for this is two different books, right? Living and Loving, written by Divaldo Franco, channeled by Divaldo Franco. The spirit author is Joanna De Angelis, and the gospel. We'll also touch on that tonight. I can't take any credit for what you're going to see. I had the pleasure, the privilege of reading material and putting it on paper, if you will. There are a couple little things that I added just for effect, so I'll take a little bit of credit. But for the most part, it's Joanna and the gospel and Divaldo. So hope you enjoy. So where do we start with love? All right. Well, what this book talks about this, it's a daily, very similar to Happy Life or Pills of Trust. We try to read one of those every morning from a different book, typically in the morning. And this entire book is about love and how to apply it to your life. And the very first section of this, it spells it out, right? Love is the source of life. Okay, loving and living, they say, have equal value. And I'm a math guy to a certain degree. So when I saw this equation of existence, right, I had to write it down. I also have 3 middle schoolers that are in various forms of pre-algebra and algebra. So I'm thinking in formulas again. So this was my formula, right? I wrote this. So what does that mean? Does love equal living? Is it that simple? Is it a one-to-one? Is it linear? Is this a metaphor? Is it a parable? What are they trying to tell us? So I turned the page, right? And what Joanna explains, right, is life, right, created by God's love, right, is that formula, right? This love equals living is the life created for us by God, right, out of His love, is the formula, right? And more importantly, right, like any formula, right, it involves solving the equation, right? This love, right, this life, rather, will only evolve when supported by the noble achievements that unselfish love provides. So they're not talking about romantic love. They're not talking about love in that material sense. They're talking about unselfish love. Furthermore, right, to fulfill this aim or this mission, right, when love is in full command. So you and I, us, right, we walk the earth, right? We're a spirit enveloped in a physical body, right? We're in this shell, right? And what commands us, right? We have a brain. We make a lot of decisions, rational, irrational, right? We're pulling the strings in a lot of ways. But what really guides us? What is our modus operandi? What is our first thought? And their point here, their lesson here is when our choices, when our decisions, our thoughts, our words, and then the actions that transcend or are initiated by those thoughts and words, when they're totally driven and enacted out of unselfish love, that's when this life that we're living, right, this eternal life, if you will, the evolution of our spirit, the evolution of our soul, when we're completely guided by love, when love is our first thought, this unselfish love, that's when we will have fulfilled the aim of life. Am I anywhere close to that right now? No. Yeah. Thank you, man. My biggest fan. I love this guy. Thank you, Tim. Do I have moments of glory and greatness? Absolutely. We all do, right? I bet you all of you can think of things that you were totally unselfish, had no personal interest. But is that every moment, every second of our day? And most of us would probably say no. Not judging, just our reality. That's why we're on earth, right? So I made this formula because I had to get it straight in my head. Unselfish love equals love fulfilled. And they're very clear. Joanna is very clear to point out Again, not just instances of unselfish love, right? Because we've all been there. We've all done that, right? But when love is in full command, right? That's when we've reached our aim. That's when we evolve and become a pure spirit, when love is in full command. So, how does this play out, right? We've all seen versions of this before. I've updated to 2020. I used to use that. Did you like the other one? All right, I'll have to go back. This one I stole. I shouldn't say stole. I borrowed from Louis Lima. Some of his slides are in here. I really like his slides. But same idea. Instead of a graph that goes up, it shows different divisions or different sections of third order, second order, first order. So when love's aim, right, when life's aim is fulfilled, in other words, when our spirit, right, is guided, when all the decisions we make are guided and driven by love, ultimately we evolve. We're still over there in the third order at some degree of that, if we're walking the earth, right? We are still imperfect. We are still in some stage of being driven by material needs and wants. Love is there. Love, we can understand it, but we don't necessarily practice it all the time. Make sense? Awesome. So, what gets in the way of life? What does that look like when you first read it? Fun, right? That's not what it means. But when I typed out that formula, it's, and I said, oh man, they're going to think I mean fun. If you have too much fun, you're not going to evolve. And that's true in some ways, but we can have fun doing the right things. We can have fun with unselfish love. But what this formula really stands for is F is the force of friction. U or mu is mass. N is normal friction, right? Normal friction. So this formula in physics equates to how the surface or texture of mass affects the friction of force. All this to say, right? Friction equates to our ego. Friction equates to vice. Friction equates to choices, right, that we make, where we're looking out for ourselves first, where we're not considering other people's interests or other people's not their intentions, but what our actions are going to do to other people. Getting ahead at the expense of an employee, getting ahead at the expense of someone else's work, making decisions so that we can pump up our chests and look powerful and smart, wealthy, whatever the facade we want to create or what have you, whatever drives us, that's not unselfish love. So that's where fun came from, right? It was that formula. That was me. That's not Joanne. just for full disclosure. Although I tell you, her writing, her words are very difficult. I mean, sometimes when I read her books, it's like reading graduate school books, and you have to read the page 20 times to understand it. But that was not her. So when we're guided by ego, I've said this before. I love breaking this down. I remember things with mnemonic devices, if you will. So when I think of ego, it reminds me of edging God out, right? When we are not making decisions in the example that Christ set for us, when we're not making choices in a moral way, when we're not putting other people's needs and wants on par with ours or ahead of ours, right? When we're thinking about ourselves, we're getting away from God, right? We're further away from God's instruction, further away from Christ's teachings, and ego is driving us. And whatever these choices are, right, we're subject to this law, right? Cause and effect. This one life that I'm living today, right? The place that I'm in, the situations I'm dealing with are direct consequence of choices I've made earlier in this life and in lives before this life. Thankfully, by the grace of God, when we incarnate, we don't bring all that baggage with us from a memory perspective. It is written, right, on our soul, if you will. It is with us. It never parts with us. We're here today to work on those things that we haven't fixed previous lives. But fortunately, we don't have any memory of it, which is great. And we set this path for our life, right? Before we come back, before we incarnate, we make a plan, a lofty plan, right? We're going to do it this time, right? We're going to make it, right? We're going to accomplish this. We're going to resolve this. We're going to mend this bridge. We're not going to do this again. Oh, what a mistake that was, right? I really messed up. And we make this amazing plan. And now every day we get to work on it, right? So I take us back to that previous slide, right? As we're living these lives, as we're evolving morally along that hierarchy of spiritual development, right? Living truly becomes the challenge to loving. That's why you'll hear different analogies or comparisons to life, like walking on earth is like a prison, right, for the spirit, right? Our spirit cannot roam. Our spirit is not free, right, until we close our eyes at night, per se. But while we're awake, while we're thinking, while we're making choices, those everyday choices, the life, the living is truly the challenge to loving. I got to deal with Valdo. I got to deal with Tim, right? I got to interact with their personalities. And I'm not, they're great guys, but my point is maybe he's not a great guy, right? And we clash heads and we fight, right? The different personalities that we encounter, the different choices that we have to make in these relationships, our marriages, our children, strangers on the street, the guy that always runs over my sprinkler when he comes to clean the pool, right? Stuff like that. All these things that push on us, right? The friction, the challenges, how I react to these challenges truly dictates what happens next, right? That cause and effect. So my ability to embrace any challenge, right? And move past it or above it, or put my ego aside and take them with, and receive them with love and find ways to overcome, finishes this or gets me along this path further or more efficiently, closer to fulfilling my aim of evolving. So we have lots of resources to learn from, right? These bookshelves are filled with spirits that have gone before us, that the words have been written, their stories have been written. The best example of all, obviously, is Christ, right? He taught us through living, right? He walked the walk, if you will. And this is my greatest impression, or what I really resonated to with Spiritism. Growing up in a more mainstream religion, right? I always had a hard time with the crucifixion. I always had hard time with that process. But as I grew up and started researching and making my own decisions about how I practice or what have you, the coolest thing I thought about the gospel, not just Spiritism, but the gospel, was every step he took, every word that he uttered, right, is a living example of how we should try to live. So we have his example. We have countless books here that share others' examples on their tragedies, on their successes. So we have a great example to follow. And the gospel is very clear, right? They tell us that life is the base, right? The foundation and the apex, as high as you can go. And all things in between, right? Love is the source, center, and destination of all realities. So God, through his love, created all life, right? The foundation of everything is that love. The destination ultimately is that love. And we have Christ's example to guide us along the way. So in the book that Joanna, that we're studying, right, this week, she has some very simple yet profound advice. If you feel sad and tired, right, from your daily troubles. How many of you had no trouble today? You have a perfect day? No? All right, me either, right? I hope you did. I hope you did. Her advice, try loving. Loving what? Loving the fact, right, the reality that you're alive. Loving the fact that you were blessed with this life. Loving the fact that you have the ability to be faced with challenges and to try to overcome. Just try to love everything that comes our way and see the benefit for us in it. And that's hard sometimes, right? It's very hard. She continues, if your load seems too heavy, how many of you feel burdened at times? Crazy times right now, right? A lot of load out there, a lot of heavy stuff. When you feel lonely within a crowd, we're not spending too much time in crowds these days, but when you feel lonely in the crowd, when you're beaten by adversity and you feel hopeless, try loving, right? Imagine that. Think about things that have gone wrong in your life. Think about down times. How did we handle it? How will we handle it if we're faced with hopelessness in the future? I hope we never have to do that. But at times, we may be in these situations. Joanna says, try loving. Be thankful for it. There's been different points in my life where I've been up and down, emotionally, financially, physically, you name it, right? We've all had these ups and downs. And the beauty, looking back on these times, for me, and I hope for you, is even when I've been at my lowest, I can look back and say, man, I really learned something from that. Or, man, I did something that if I were ever faced with this again, I wouldn't act that way again. So this try loving perspective, anytime we get down or we're faced with challenges, if we can take that hindsight mentality that I just expressed, where I can look back and identify what I would do differently, my hope is as I face adversity tomorrow or next week or who knows, whenever, that I can take that hindsight and apply it to that situation and make the best of trying to use love in those down times. Easier said than done, yeah? But I hope I can do it. That's my goal. What else does she say? Whatever the circumstances, no matter how difficult the situation that confronts you, try loving. Sounds so simple, yeah? But it's very challenging at times, for sure. Then she goes on to tell us, in this process of trying to love, right? Unselfish love, make that your command, right? Spread love like a fertilizing pollen made of light. Why light? Light's really fast. The speed of light is amazing, right? So at every opportunity, take that love, that unselfish love inside of you, craft it, sculpt it, shape it, share it, right? Build it up in you, harvest it, nurture it, and then share it like fertilizer, right? Be an example for others. Be a beacon of light unto others. And if we do this, every time we do this, love will fly back to us as peace and spiritual beauty. I feel like that sometimes when we're doing vibrations, right? Just visualizing love that emanates from Christ coming down over my head and then radiating that out to the world around us. And it's truly calming and peaceful. But when you're stuck in traffic on I-4, it's not always easy to feel that or to share that, right? So what else does the gospel tell us, right? On how to do this. How can we build this reservoir of unselfish love so that it eventually occupies our entire being, right? So that we are unselfish love. Well, one of those lessons, right, or tasks is never return evil with evil, right? The golden rule, do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. Christ mentions this at different points, more specifically, I think in Matthew is the section that's usually quoted for this. But they describe this, she describes this as the perfect solution for all human problems. Now, I at times will watch things on Netflix. I like documentaries. I like history. And at some point, I think I thought the kids had gone to bed, or maybe they did go to sleep, but they woke up. And I was watching the story about the assassination of Osama bin Laden, right? The documentary about it, the historical facts. And at some point, one of the girls came out of their bedroom, unbeknownst to me. So the violent stuff, not that was terribly violent. There were pieces of it but that's not something I would typically watch with the kids at their age. But at some point, they watched it with me a little bit, unbeknownst to me. And it started a conversation because my daughter that saw this said, well, he really got what he deserved, didn't he? You know, he hurt a lot of people. You know, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting her. But essentially, it was a great opportunity, I thought, to talk about unselfish love. Maybe because I've been preparing this, right? So we had this whole discussion about the terrible things that this man did. And now he's dead, and his spirit is no longer tied to material and is going through the same process that the rest of us are going through, right? Learning, trying to improve, evolving. And I shared the fact that we should pray for him, for his spirit, for his soul. And it was very profound. I mean, you could see the wheels turning in her head. It's like, really? And I think she got it. Who knows? I don't think I would have gotten it at 12 years old. But the point is, regardless of the offenses that anyone does, right, to us, to others, to society, that person is still our brother, still our sister, still destined for perfection, right? And we should try to love them, pray for them. You don't have to invite them to dinner, right? You don't have to be his best friend, right? But we should love and pray for all those folks that are making bad choices, just as we would want mercy and forgiveness for the things that we do that aren't so great. Make sense? Does it sound too hard to do, or does it make like we can do this? Yeah? Okay. The best way to do this, right, Joanna tells us, right, is do as Jesus did. Right? His life is chronicled and written down in every language just about around the world, right? Everybody, even if they're not Christian, most people know the story of Jesus, right? And even if you're not a believer, right? If you could be an atheist or just a religion or a philosophy that doesn't look at Christ as a pure spirit, however you want to say it. But if you just looked at the life of the man that walked the earth and everybody chose to follow that example, right, would the world be a better place? Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So he always loved, right? And they tell us, right? She tells us, always try loving and continue loving until love becomes an inherent part of yourself. Habits are hard to change, right? We're coming up on the end of the year. We're all going to make New Year's resolutions more than likely. And we know to change habits takes time and consistency. A new habit can take a long time before it's really a habit. How many of us have quit smoking or quit eating cookies or started going to the gym on January 1st or 2nd, right? And that's our resolution. That's our goal. And unless we do it consistently for a long time, it's just a fad. It's just a trend, right? It doesn't become a habit. So the goal is try loving today, continue loving tomorrow, and every day until it becomes an inherent part of yourself. And I'm way off on that. I am not anywhere close to being driven 100% by love 24/7. So I have a lot of work to do. So the words of Christ, as I've said, are written in many places. We have tons of resources to study his life, to study his example. And some of those examples we'll talk about today, things that we can follow, right? In the gospel, right? Because the gospel in total, right, really taken it piece by piece or as a whole, it really reminds us to wake up, right? On the days, if I go too many days without picking up a book and reading a passage or praying, which I'm really getting better at doing this daily and several times throughout the day. But there are slumps. I like slumps. I like that term, right? These periods of time when I fall off the wagon, right? And as I progress the length of time that I don't pay attention to this, I go back to my old ways sometimes. So the gospel, when written or when read daily or practiced daily, we stay awake, right? It wakes us up, right? It helps us connect and listen to the voices, the thoughts of our mentors, our guardians, if you will, good energy, good spirits. And if we are in a place where we're connected and open to their assistance, because there's always assistance for us, right? Their words, they tell us, right, can echo in our hearts, right? To be generous towards ourselves, towards others, be loving, right, towards ourselves, towards others, and to do good quietly. Don't do things for show. Don't let ego drive why you're doing good things for other people. Do it quietly. Do it anonymously. What is it? Don't let your left hand see what your right hand is doing, right? But to keep this up, to stay awake, it requires work, right? And that's why we should spend time daily connecting. Because ultimately, when we die, right, when this life is over, anything we've accumulated material, right, our titles, our bank accounts, our names, our fancy cars, our nice clothes. This is a pretty shirt. No, doesn't go anywhere with me, right? It stays in my closet, goes in the casket, whatever the case might be. Um, None of this stuff assures us happiness or bliss. And the more simple and loving that we can be on a daily basis, right? And the more of those days we string end to end, right? And the more we're driven by love as our guiding force, the easier that transition will be, that easier um, that acceptance is going to be. Simple and love, simplicity and love. So one of the key ingredients to this formula, right, and this is from the gospel, this is not in Joanna's book that we're talking about, is humbleness, okay? What does humbleness do, right? We talked a little bit about it previously. When we're humble, when we are thinking of others, when we are not seeking simply choices made out of our ego or our pride, we see everybody as brothers and sisters. We're equals, right? So much so that we talk other people up. We look for ways to help them so they can get ahead, right? And by doing this, it creates compassion, right? We live compassionately, feel other people's pain, cheer for them, work for them in the sense of trying to help them, and doing whatever we can not to be just looking out for ourselves. So humbleness is a key ingredient to living simply and lovingly, right? Because we know that the greatest among us, right? This is also from the gospel, is the humblest of the humble. Who comes to mind when you think of really humble people? Mother Teresa always pops in my head, right? And Tim pops in my head too, right? The humblest of the humble, right? The most prepared is he who has loved his or her fellow humans, right? Amazing. All right, only 2 more hours, I swear. We're getting there. So let's go back to the formula, right? Living is the challenge to loving, right? Unselfish love equals a life fulfilled. So in our aim or our desire to evolve, in our desire to grow, in our desire to make love our first thought, our first word, our guiding action, right? Stemming from love. Humbleness is a key ingredient to that. Looking at others, regardless of who they are or the things that they do, that they're our brother, they're our sister. What can we do to help them? Right? We pray for them, right? Not have a lot of conflict with them. Don't get in altercations like Tim was talking about earlier when he did his reading, right? Don't take extremes. Try to find middle ground. Try to find a desire to love them even in their nastiness, if you will, towards you, if it's one of those types of situations. Because ultimately, the greatest example of this was what, right? Christ on the cross, right? Praying for his executioners as they were fulfilling their duty, their responsibility, praying for them and forgiving them for what they did. So, I had a little double tap in there. I didn't know. I was like, what happened? The next piece to this, right, after humbleness is forgiveness, all right? Who do we forgive first? Or should I say, who do we always forget to forgive? Ourselves. I don't know about you, but if I'm like you or you're like me, I'm probably my worst enemy as far as beating myself up for mistakes and things from the past. So the gospel encourages us to forgive offenses. How many times did Christ tell us to forgive others? 77 times. Not just the person, but just the offense, right? Not everything they do, but each offense, 77 times to forgive them. Well, we need to forgive ourselves, right? Remember, the past is the past. Do we have to account? Do we have to reconcile? Absolutely. But think of something that you don't like to think about, right? Don't spend a lot of time on it. But remember, that event happened how many times? Exactly. Every time you think about it and beat yourself up, the brain doesn't know the difference. You're experiencing it all over again. So forgive yourself. Forgive others 77 times. Yes, yes, I'm 70. Yeah, even see? I'm such a small picture guy. You got the big number. Exactly. Exactly, right? Even beyond what I'm thinking. 77 times.
Yeah, because Peter asked him, is it okay if I forgive him 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7.
Yeah, that's a lot of times.
That's a lot.
Exactly. So the key to this, though, is to remember that there's two manners or forms of forgiveness. The forgiveness that comes from our lips. How many times have I said sorry for something I did wrong, right? And how many times have people said sorry for me? And I said, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. But inside, I'm like, oh, that guy. I got a guy I work with, right, that we don't always see eye to eye, right? But, I'm trying, right? I'm patient. I'm trying to meet him in the middle, Tim. I'm trying to find some middle ground, right? And how many times have verbally I said, it's not a big deal. I see his point. I forgive him, or I'm not mad at him. But you know what? I'm still mad at him, right? That's from the lips. That's forgiveness from the lips, right? Then there's true forgiveness from the heart. And true forgiveness from the heart is described as this in the gospel. It's the kind of forgiveness, excuse me, it's the kind of forgiveness that casts a veil over the past, a veil, right? You can't see through a veil. I read this, I listened to a podcast, this biohack podcast, and it was talking about sleep and the dangers of light, right? So I bought this thing that I wrap my head in. My kids make fun of me. It's like that thing you get on an airplane when you're flying at night, but on steroids. I mean, this thing it's a veil. I mean, there's no light coming through this thing. So I started sleeping with that, and the guy's right, man. It works. You sleep a lot better. But now if I forget to put it on, right, I toss and turn. And that reminds me of forgiveness from the lips or forgiveness from the heart. When you truly forgive somebody from the heart, it's gone, right? You're not holding on to it. You're not mad at him. It doesn't cross your mind. Oh, that guy did this. I got to watch out for him, right? It's gone, right? It's completely absent. What's this here? The complete and absolute forgiveness of offenses is proper of great souls. So if I'm going to evolve and be a pure spirit and move along this hierarchy of spiritual development, I've got to forgive from here, not from here. Easier said than done. They remind us that rancor is always a sign of low-mindedness, inferiority. True forgiveness is recognized by actions much more than by words. Excuse me. So, how do we do this? How do we grow? How do we forgive? How do we make amends? Can we do it by ourselves, right? Or do we need help? I think we need help, and that's why I love this slide. I've used this picture before. Some of the closest people in our circle, right? Family, friends, will be some of the people that hurt us the most, right? I can think of instances with family members that were really tough, to the point where some of them didn't want to talk to me for a while. They didn't talk to me for a while, or vice versa, right? But ultimately, you make amends and you forgive and you grow together. Some of the closest people in your life that cause this adversity are your biggest allies or confidant or helpers in your path, right? If we avoided conflict, if we avoided these tough personalities, if we avoided these relationships that we've put into our life, remember, before we were born, right, we made this plan. We put ourselves in a certain geographical location, a certain socioeconomic situation, a certain health condition, and some key spirits that we had to work with, right, that we hadn't made amends with in the past. And sure enough, that could be your wife, it could be your father, it could be your brother, it could be your best friend, right? Those people, those spirits are in your life by design, typically by our choosing in a lot of ways. Great opportunity to come together, make amends, and grow. We can't do it by ourselves. If I wanted to avoid all this and just go live on an island or under a bridge, as I like to say, I'm not going to grow because I'm not subjecting myself to any of you and to any of the hardships that you can present to me or me to you, right? Because we don't have to choose at that point. So, finally, right, the gospel reminds us to make your hearts gentle and mild, and you will find the path filled with laurels, placed to celebrate your return to the road of goodness, compassion, and love. What's a great way to make our hearts gentle and mild? Right? We've talked about it a lot tonight. We talked about humbleness. We talked about forgiveness. But most importantly, right, we talked about the example of Christ when he walked the earth. All the resources that are available to us to study that, all of the opportunities to vibrate and get in tune with that and connect to our guardian angels, our mentors, and follow their advice. So I thank you for your time and attention tonight and the opportunity and privilege to prepare this for you. Thank you so much.